Hey, and did you know I'm currently accepting new patients in New York, offering both in person and telehealth visits? And I also provide telehealth for patients in Michigan, with North Carolina coming soon. And I also offer coaching, both intimacy coaching and menopause coaching, nationally and internationally. So look us up on www.femvhealth.com. So, this episode is about infidelity. And before we get into the episode, I want you to know that it is a very sensitive topic. And for those people that have experienced infidelity, I am sure it might be a little bit triggering for you. So, I want to make sure that you get the help that you need by speaking to a healthcare professional or a therapist. And definitely, as always, this is not any type of religious advice. So, it's really important to seek the counsel of your own religious leader to make sure that, you do something that fits your values. So this conversation that we are about to have about infidelity is about how to move forward after you have experienced infidelity and kind of what are the steps to take. So I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did recording it, and on to the episode. I'm an American board certified OBGYN, a mom, a Muslim, and I'm talking about sex. This is the Muslim Sex Podcast. Welcome to the Muslim Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sadaf, and this episode is everything you need to know about infidelity and moving on and what you can do and what happens next. But before I get into it, the few things I want to make very clear: this is not any advice on religion or your medical health. So if you have any questions about your health, make sure you go see your healthcare provider. And if you have any questions about your religion, make sure you go speak with your friendly neighborhood religious leader. This is the Muslim Sex Podcast because I just happen to be a Muslim woman that talks about sex. So today I'm super excited to have on with me Lauren Consul. Lauren is a sex therapist. So Lauren, for all those people that may not know who you are, if you could please introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers out there.
Yeah. I'm Lauren Consul. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sex therapist. And I specialize in infidelity, which means I am sitting with people in some of the messiest and most painful, yet transformative often moments of their lives and helping them navigate the aftermath of infidelity and kind of figuring out what that looks like for them. And I work with both the partner who was hurt, the partner who was unfaithful. Sometimes I'm working with the affair partner themselves. And, I have a support group. I do a retreat with couples. So I've seen this from lots of different angles and lots of different stories and lots of different people.
Wow, that's amazing. And so I have never had anyone on that has spoken about this. And so when you told me that you dealt with this, I was so fascinated that I had to have you on the podcast. So tell me, how do you define infidelity? Is it always physical, or can it be emotional or digital? And can they be just as damaging, you think?
Infidelity is really defined by any breach of a relational agreement. So it's not up to me to define what infidelity is. It's what are the agreements in the relationship, and has one partner unilaterally, without the consent of the other person, broken that agreement. So we often think of physical or sexual infidelity as being the most damaging, but emotional infidelity, virtual or digital infidelity can be just as damaging because it is a breach of trust without the consent of your partner. And oftentimes what I hear, even if it's like just what I say just, but like if there's physical or sexual, a lot of times the people I'm working with say like, yeah, that's not great. I don't love that my partner did that. That's very painful. But what hurts almost more is that they lied to me, the deceit, that they looked me in the eye, the betrayal that was consistent over time hurt. So it's not about one being worse than the other. It's really of what was the nature of the breach of the agreement? How did it come out? There's so many factors that go into how painful it is for people.
Yeah. And so what are some common misconceptions you think about that people have about infidelity?
Yeah. I think a lot of people think that infidelity only happens in quote unquote bad relationships or where people aren't happy. And that's just not true. And then that can be really scary, I think, for people, because it's like, well, I have a good relationship, or I feel connected to my partner. And does that mean that infidelity can happen in my relationship? And it's possible, because infidelity is not just about I'm not happy. It can be something that's happening individually in that person. I kind of think of shakeup affairs or breakup affairs. People where there's shakeup affairs, it's like I want something to be different either within me or within the relationship, and I don't know how to do it. Or there's breakup affairs where you want this relationship to end, but I don't know how to do it. And I want to be very clear. None of this is an excuse. Like there's no excuse for this. We do need understanding though, because understanding is how we heal and move forward.
Mm. Oh, that's so interesting. This is just a thought while you were talking that I had. That do you find that like, I mean, this could be one of the reasons, I don't know, something that just came to my head is that do you think that sometimes people have affairs if they find something missing in their relationship and so they find it with somebody else? I guess, I don't know. What do you think? Have you seen that?
Yeah, it can definitely be something that's like missing in the relationship. And it may be something that they've never communicated to their partner, or maybe they have and they don't know how to navigate it. A lot of times, what I see, affairs kind of happen slowly. Many people don't go out looking for affairs. Of course, that does happen, but it's like somebody in their orbit and somebody at work, or somebody in their hobby, or somebody in their family, someone that they're around, not their family, but like extended family is what I mean. But that makes them feel a certain way, or reminds them of something that like, oh, that feels really good, or we used to have that and we don't anymore, or I never had that and that feels nice. And it can be a buildup over time where it's just this kind of slippery slope. So it can definitely be when something is missing in the relationship or in within that person themselves. It's just there's such a wide variety of reasons that people engage in infidelity that we can't just say it's always this or always that, which people tend to do with infidelity. It tends to get very black and white. You must leave, you must stay, you must do that, you must be this, they must be a narcissist, they must be that. And there's so much gray, and we have to work in the gray.
So interesting. So, what are some common themes that you have seen with couples that you've worked with who have experienced infidelity?
I can't really speak to themes beforehand. Like there's no like telltale signs that there's infidelity or your partner's cheating. Like I wish I could tell people that, because it would give us some sense
And
of
you'd be a
control.
millionaire.
Yeah, right. But what I do see is a lot of themes afterwards. There's a lot of common themes. This is actually why I created the support group, because I was seeing the same things. And I'm like, I can tell my clients till I'm blue in the face, like, this is normal. So many people experience this, but they kind of have to trust, that I've seen this in a lot of people versus like hearing it from others. And there's so much shame on both sides. The hurt partner, if they're staying, or even if they don't stay, there's shame of my partner cheated on me. What does that mean about me? Am I not good enough? The partner who stepped out, what does this mean about me? I never thought I'd be this person. There's feelings of self-doubt. Like, how do I learn to trust myself again? That's a huge theme that comes up. Like, I thought everything was okay, and then this came. How do I ever learn to trust myself again, let alone my partner? But what about for me? Right? And then feelings of isolation, just feeling alone, because this is such a topic that is polarizing. So many people don't tell anybody else, or tell very few people, because they don't want the shame and the judgment or the black and white advice. So it can feel incredibly lonely.
Yeah, you know what I've seen sometimes is that if, let's say, a partner cheats on another partner, right? And then if their family finds out, then the family will put the blame on, let's say, one of the partners, right? Or maybe on the wife or something like that. Like, oh, it's because of you that he did that, right? Or, that you were a certain way. And so you drove him away or something like that. Have you ever seen that?
So I've definitely seen that, where families do put blame on one or another partner. And this is something that comes up a lot of, if you choose to tell family or friends, there has to be a repair process with the family and usually the partner who stepped out. And that can be a struggle. Like, people aren't always expecting that. They might be healing with their partner because they're having these daily reparative experiences. But the extended family, the friends, aren't having that. So their process can be slower and behind. So then it puts the hurt partner in a weird position, because they're like, now I feel like I'm defending my partner who cheated to my family or friends, which feels weird. And now I'm like in between. So it can create odd dynamics, or where it's like I'm getting blamed because my partner stepped out or they're being blamed, and it can create a lot more challenges in the healing process that I don't think people often anticipate when they start to tell family or tell friends about it. And it sucks because this is a time when you need support. I often have this conversation with clients where I'm like, as a therapist, it like hurts my heart to say like we want to be mindful of like who you tell, because I'm so big about relationships and support and reaching out to people. But also I've seen so much damage happen when people tell the wrong people, or sometimes what you think is the right people, and they end up being not as helpful. It's really a delicate part of the healing process.
So, how do you think social media has changed the landscape of infidelity, or has it?
Oh, it's totally changed infidelity in so many ways, because partners are having to have conversations that they didn't have to have, a decade ago, or maybe more. Maybe I'm dating myself there, but before social media, because there's this real time in potential engagement, and versus like when there used to be just magazines or videos. There, people didn't always love that in relationships, but it's like, well, there wasn't this potential of me reaching out to this person or having an ongoing relationship, even if it was cyber relationship with them, or seeing them and being updated. So there's these kind of new relationships that we are grappling with, or just even looking at sexy pictures, or what does that mean, or liking somebody, or sliding into someone's DMs. How does that work in this relationship? How do I feel about that? And people feel differently about what it means to look at certain things or not. And so there's all these things that have to be navigated. I think, again, there's a lot of opinions. Well, like, you shouldn't care about that, or if you had confidence or that. But if your partner's coming to you and saying, this bothers me, it needs to be a conversation. It doesn't mean that it has to be one way or another, but there's always the collaborative conversation that I try to bring people back to, and understanding what it means for each partner. Right?
Yeah, I would imagine that that would be a really touchy subject, right? Like if your partner is telling you they don't like a certain thing, and then but you're still engaging in it, and whether it's like, through social media, whatever, then I would assume that that would really cause some tension in that relationship.
Yeah. And I think that has to be navigated with care of both partners, honoring both partners' wants and desires. Because I think there's a lot of, where it's like, okay, this one partner doesn't want you looking at this certain social media or using this certain erotic material. Like, so you just shouldn't. And it's like, well, what about the other partner and their autonomy and their sense of their own sexuality and their sense of their sexual self? So it's not just saying like, you should do this or you shouldn't do this, but it's really understanding what it means to each partner and getting underneath it. So then you can come up with a solution. 'Cause so often I see partners be like, okay, well, I don't want you looking at that person. The other person doesn't really agree, like internally, but they'll be like, yeah, I won't look at it. And they keep looking. And so it creates, then there's this breach. And it's like, how do we create space for both partners to be heard and understood, and like what it means to look at this or not look at it for them, and create collaborative discussions around it, rather than just the quick, like, okay, I won't do it anymore. Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad I'm not in your shoes. It sounds like a really difficult position to be in. I'm like, "What the heck? How do you even navigate all of that?" So, what do you think is betrayal trauma, and how does it affect the betrayed, partner?
Betrayal trauma is a special kind of trauma when there's this breach of trust with somebody that you kind of rely on for your sense of safety and security. And when I say safety and security, I'm talking about more of the attachment lens, like of, this person is my person. I can turn to them. I can trust that when I got my back turned, that they are going to keep me safe and protect me. And that is our safe attachment. And so when there's a breach of that, that's really what we call that betrayal trauma, and really understanding how that can have a deeper, more painful impact, because this is the person that I turn to. I kind of think of the metaphor of a teddy bear and a grizzly bear. Like, this person
Mm.
was your teddy bear. I snuggle them when I'm feeling scared. They're my person I turn to. But now they've done something and they're a grizzly bear, right? And what do we do for the grizzly bear? I got to get away. Like, this is not safe anymore. But who did you turn to, like, when you weren't feeling safe? That teddy bear. So it's this very confusing, like, push and pull. Like, are you the teddy bear? Are you the grizzly bear? And it can like flip in a moment. when we're recovering from a betrayal. So it can be really confusing, and we have to kind of rewire that this person is a teddy bear. They're a safe person, but it's a unique healing process.
Yeah, how do you even do that? I mean, how do you switch or get someone to switch their thoughts, right? From like somebody that they used to be able to trust and now they're not able to trust them anymore.
So if I had a trademark phrase, it'd be consistent action over time, right? Time alone is not enough. Time can kind of ease things, but time without action isn't going to do anything, and action alone isn't going to be enough. You can be doing all the right things, but if you're doing it for a week, that's not enough time to train your brain again like this person is that teddy bear. So it's consistent trust building actions over time, so it's going slow, showing up, taking accountability and responsibility, being proactive, bringing up the infidelity, like doing all of these actions consistently over time. And it's usually a long period of time. This is a long recovery process.
So, what are some like normal emotional responses after discovering an affair?
There's a phrase of post-infidelity stress disorder. So it's not an actual diagnosis. It's not in the DSM, but we kind of use it in the infidelity, betrayal, trauma space because so many people who experience infidelity show similar symptoms to people with PTSD. So nightmares and hypervigilance and rumination, physical responses that they're having, or you might withdraw or numb, like all of these responses are within that kind of range of normal, and it can make you feel totally not like yourself. That's another common thing I hear when we're talking about that theme of commonalities of like, I don't feel like myself. Like, who am I? Like, is the partner who was hurt? And what I tell people is like, this isn't like who you are now. This is you responding to a trauma, and how we are when we respond to a trauma is not who we are. Because a lot of times it can feel really scary to not feel like yourself. And is this who I am and who I'm going to be? And like, is this how I'm going to feel forever? And like, that is hopefully like not going to be it.
Yeah, I can I'm just thinking like how difficult that whole process may be. So, from basically your experience, I mean, you've been doing this for quite a while now,
Mhm.
how long does recovery, I suppose it depends person to person, but typically, I guess if you were to give like a range, how long does it typically take for a person to recover from an experience such as this?
It it usually takes about 2 to 5 years, which can feel like a lot. And when I tell people that, they're like, "Oh no." And it's not, what I tell them is not how you feel right now in this moment is what it's going to be for the next 2 to 5 years, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're all better. It's a long process of, again, changing that grizzly bear to teddy bear. And that's going to take that consistent action over time. And the goal is to reduce, the triggers and these big responses in frequency and intensity and duration over time. So it will change. And a lot of times when I tell people if we're at 6 months or a year, think back a year ago, and how different things were then. They're like, yeah, it was so different. So that's this process. Like, hopefully a year from now, you're going to feel different, but it's going to take time. And it depends a lot on, the trauma history of each partner that they're coming in with, the trauma history in the relationship, outside of the relationship, and childhood, kind of the nature of the infidelity, how it was disclosed or discovered. If there was what's called trickle truthing, where there's like little bits of information that come out at a time, that can extend it. So there's all these kind of factors that can come in and make that a longer or shorter period, but it's not consistent. I've had people who've come in and kind of 6 months, they feel pretty good and feel like they're like moving forward. But that's often people with not a lot of trauma in their background, kind of an infidelity that didn't feel too big to them. And I'm using that language, trying to be very mindful there, because it's going to be different for every person of how they respond to it. But it's a long road.
Yeah. So, what are some mistakes you think you find that couples do once they find out about the infidelity?
Mistakes I see that people will tell me later on is they told too many people initially,
Yeah.
or told their kids. in that like initial kind of whirlwind. And not to say that you should or shouldn't tell your kids, that's a very personal decision, but oftentimes it's like, I wish I hadn't told them in the way that I did, in that immediate, like high intensity emotionality. And sometimes people can't protect them because the kids might be there when the discovery happens for whatever reason. But that, or telling a lot of people, people might think, well, I'm going to leave this relationship, so I'm going to tell everybody. And then they decide to work on it. And now they also have, like I was saying earlier, all that repair work or all these opinions and thoughts coming in. But it's also really hard because you've just learned this like incredibly devastating information. And what do we do when something like that happens? We turn to our people. So it's this push and pull of like, be mindful of who you're telling, but you're also going through this trauma. Like, how do you not reach out to people, but trying to be really mindful of who you're telling and trying not to make major decisions in this moment, right? I'm going to go move. I'm going to sell the car. I'm going to sell the house. I'm going to do this thing. Like, you staying for right now doesn't mean you're staying forever. It just means I just experienced a trauma and I need some time to process it. It doesn't have to mean anything, but like I'm giving myself some space. So really trying to go slow and give yourself space.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, what does accountability look like from an unfaithful partner, you think?
It looks like really taking responsibility for your actions, saying, I cheated, not I cheated, but we weren't having sex. I cheated, but you weren't talking to me. I cheated, but, I have this childhood trauma. Like, we do want to understand, and the why is a huge piece of moving forward and healing. But when we put that but in there, it excuses it. It's trying to excuse, or that's how it can come across, or it discounts what's before. It's, I cheated. And I understand there were things happening in our relationship dynamic, and I didn't communicate them well. I didn't understand what was happening with me. I understand my childhood traumas here, and I cheated. I totally take accountability for that. So it's holding those two things as true. So it's this small shift in but to and, but it's really the understanding that makes all the difference. And it's really important to have that shift. Right? So it's taking that accountability and taking it consistently, over time, like, and holding that. It's holding vigilance for the infidelity. That phrase comes from Esther Perel, holding vigilance. And it's really about holding or proactively bringing up the infidelity, coming to your partner, asking how you're doing, how they're doing, saying, hey, I know this work trip's coming up, or I'm going to this restaurant that's a trigger, or I know so-and-so is going to be there. How are you feeling? Right? Or just checking in, like, where are you at today? Because so often I see the partner who was unfaithful say, well, I don't want to upset my partner. I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to make things worse. And the hurt partner is like, it's on my head. It's in my brain. Right? I'm thinking about this, and knowing you're in it with me, you're bringing it up helps me feel less alone. Like, even if it does feel upsetting, I'm not alone in it. That's a big piece. I'm not alone in this. And I see this come up, especially as time goes on. A lot of partners who are unfaithful can be really good those first 6-9 months. Sometimes around the year mark, it's like there's some fatigue that can set in of like, how long are we going to do this for? And that's where we kind of talk about the timeline. It's that consistently over time. The more you do it, kind of the faster we move through this. So we have to like slow down to go fast. Slow and being with your partner in the moment is going to help you move forward faster. But it's hard because it's really, they have to look at their stuff that they're not proud of usually, see how it's impacted their partner. But it's really sitting with your partner in it and being with them in that space.
I think also, it really shows that the person that committed the infidelity is really taking ownership of their actions, right? And also checking in with the other person to make sure that they're okay. And they may not be okay, right? So I guess it's really, I don't know, it seems like a very tough process, though, that's for sure. It seems like it would take a while for that trust to build up again. So how long, I mean, I know you mentioned this whole process can take like 2 to 5 years. Do you think it's possible for somebody to fully trust somebody again after infidelity?
I think the question is like, what does it mean to fully trust?
Yeah.
And they have to decide what that means. And you're most likely not going to trust in the same way that you did before. And that's because something has happened. A trauma has happened. And this is like anything we experience. We cannot go back to the person we were before this thing happened. So it's not always just in this relationship. Because sometimes they're like, can I trust my partner again? This breach has happened. This trauma is with you, right? It's like a scar that you have. Right now, it's this open wound and we're working on healing it. And the goal is for it to turn into a scar and it heals and starts to fade over time. But that scar is going to be with you for life. And so you're taking this in this relationship or the next one. So, or whatever relationship you have in the future. And so what does trust mean to you? And I often think, when we talk about trust, it's like this on-off switch. Do I trust him or not? And it's really not that. I see it more as a dial and really more like a set of dials. Because there's lots of people in our lives who are like, oh, I would trust them with my life, but I wouldn't trust them to show up to dinner on time, right? So we have these different kind of ways of trusting people. And I think that's true in our romantic relationships too. So I will often ask people, we've been rebuilding trust. Like, where do you think you are? Sometimes even having them put a number on it, like a percentage. And that can help them go, oh, when I first found out about the infidelity, it was 0. And now maybe I'm at even 20%. Okay. And what percentage can you tolerate? It may not ever be 100%. It may not be 100% with anyone ever again. But is 90%? Does that feel okay? And these are kind of amorphous topics to like sit with, but I think it helps take it away from that black and white light switch. Do I trust them or not? Or what areas of life do you trust them in? Like what areas need more? Do we need to work on turning that dial up with? I do truly believe you can rebuild trust after infidelity because I've seen it happen. Because I've seen so many couples that I've sat with who will say to me, this is down the line of our work, but they'll say, I hate how we got here, but I love and I'm so grateful for where our relationship is at now. And that's something we kind of have to grapple with too, of like, what does that mean that they are so grateful and loving this relationship they're in now because it's more intimate or it's safer or there's more depth to it? Because to really heal from infidelity, and this is why I do this work, is because 2 partners have to show up consistently and vulnerably and put everything on the table and do that repeatedly over time. And it's a beautiful and messy process. And it can create such depth in a relationship. And there can be pain if they're like, well, the only reason we got here is because there was this trauma of this infidelity. But I have seen it and it can happen.
So what do you think are the key ingredients to rebuilding trust?
The partner who was unfaithful, taking accountability, responsibility for their actions. And part of that is understanding the why, understanding why this happened. Okay, so here I tend to use a lot of metaphors. I use this metaphor of a mechanic. So if your car breaks down in this like disastrous way and you take it to the mechanic and the mechanic kind of, looks at it and it's like, oh yeah, okay, maybe this is what happened or this, and I'll try some things. You are not going to feel very safe driving that car again. But if that mechanic goes, oh, I see what happened. It was this and this, and let me fix some things. And here's some things you can do to help prevent this from happening in the future. I can't guarantee it won't, but here's some things you can do. You're going to feel a lot safer in driving that car. So that's why the why is really important. And that's one thing that the partner who was unfaithful has to really work on, understanding that piece, because that helps them, work on themselves, but also helps rebuild trust for the hurt partner, because they're saying, okay, I see my partner doing this work, understanding. So if something happens again in our relationship, maybe there was not as much sex or there was disconnection, like I have more trust that there's going to be different things in place for that. There's also like being open to having similar conversations repeatedly over time. Like the hurt partner often wants to talk through things multiple times or ask similar questions. And that's because we process information over time. We take in information differently. How they heard the story, right after discovery or disclosure is going to be different than if they heard it 3 weeks later or 3 months later or 3 years. So they're going to have to go back. Now there's a fine line between rumination and kind of understanding. So we want to work with, why are you asking this again? What are you trying to understand? So it's not just this like repetitive, encouraging rumination, but really trying to help them get to like, why am I asking this? And the partner who was unfaithful really having patience and being open to having these conversations, because it can be hard to be like, I answered this same question again. But it's really going slow and at their partner's pace.
it sounds like a really difficult process, all of this.
Mhm.
So what role do you think does like transparency play in all of this? And how do the couples even know if they're making any progress?
Transparency is really important because that's how we can rebuild trust, but it's something we want to be really mindful of because we want to know, we want to look at like, is this transparency or is this more of surveillance? And surveillance tends to be where it's keeping the hurt partner in that hypervigilance, in this like detective mode of I'm going to like figure everything out. And that can keep them, their nervous system in that hypervigilant state for too long, can create anxiety, and may not be beneficial. So when I'm working with couples, what I like to talk about are like creating safety agreements, and these will evolve over time. So like if a couple comes in really, soon after discovery or disclosure, we're working on what do you need to feel just even a little bit safer. Like you're feeling like the feet under your ground, the ground under your feet a little bit more, right? Just feeling something. And sometimes that's sharing passwords or putting phones on the table, or it's video calls when they're away at work, or sharing location. Like I don't have a set of like rules at all. It's about each partnership figuring out what agreements work for them. And what I say is often these early safety agreements are not necessarily healthy for the long term. But if we're talking about kind of triaging and like, okay, is there even going to be a relationship to like work on in the future? Like that's what we're doing here. But we revisit these really frequently. So transparency comes up a lot because sometimes the hurt partner will be like, I should just have access to everything. And we don't want it just to be this demand list. We again want it to be a collaboration and understanding and have intention behind it of like, why is that helping you feel safer? Like, what about this? Like, is it benefiting you in the same way? With making progress, it's really about looking at, are there shifts happening? Are we moving in the direction that feels like things are shifting the way that you want? You're feeling a little bit safer. Your triggers are happening a little less frequently, with less intensity, less duration. You're seeing that things are happening consistently. Your partner's showing up. You're not getting it perfect, right? But we're showing up, and you're showing up even if it's messy. Because a lot of times couples are learning new skills, how to communicate, how to identify emotions. Like that's going to lead to some difficult conversations. Sometimes it can get really big, and that's okay. But are we trying and keeping looking at shifts? I like that word shifts because it doesn't feel like everything has to change. And then it's really looking at, is it shifting enough for you? Right? Things could be shifting and you're like, it's not working. And I think that's where people get stuck because they're like, I do see progress. I think I see things changing, but it's still not working for me. And that's okay too.
Yeah. Something that's I'm really curious about is, how does this infidelity affect a couple's sexual relationship? So, I've had some patients actually in my practice. They were not Muslim patients, and I say that only because this is the Muslim Sex podcast, but they were not Muslim patients. But they have actually two of them have open relationships, which is something very different, right? I mean, it's not there. It's what you spoke about actually in the beginning is that it's not a contract that is broken, right? It's because that is their relationship. They have an understanding that they have an open relationship. And so they have a set of rules, and they have a rule that, they're going to keep each other safe, even if they are intimate with other people because they have an open marriage. They're going to keep each other safe by disclosing if they get any, STDs or anything like that. And so I actually had a patient who has an open relationship, and her partner contracted chlamydia, and he didn't tell her. And so then she, started having some symptoms, whatever. She came to me, we did exams. She ended up having chlamydia, and she was really, really upset with her partner because he didn't disclose that he had gotten this. And even though they have an open relationship, the open marriage, they, their understanding of this open marriage is that they're going to keep each other safe. So, I wonder after people have experienced infidelity in a regular marriage, how that would affect their sexual relationship. I mean, I assume that it would probably affect it a lot.
Hmm. And I think you bring up a really good point, because I also work a lot with non-monogamous couples, and there can absolutely still be infidelity in non-monogamy, because like what you were talking about, there's relationship agreement. So there was a relationship agreement that was broken of not keeping the other partner safe, whether that was not using protection or not disclosing the STI to them. Like, so that is a breach of trust. That is infidelity in how I defined it, right? And that's where it really comes back to, of like, that might mean a lot to her, might not mean very much. It really just depends on the person, but there's still this breach of trust in there, right? But how it can impact a sex life is it's huge. It
Yeah.
can, for some, I see the gamut. And I want to say that because if you're listening, you've experienced infidelity, like this is probably the widest range that I see. I mean, some people, their sex life explodes with their partner. It's hot and it's heavy and they're trying new things, and others, it goes completely dormant and it feels so non-existent and feels so scary, or feels so just inaccessible. And many people also vacillate between those two. So that's where it's like, wherever you fall on this, it is most likely still within that range of pretty typical. And knowing that, because this is another area where I hear people a lot say, like, I just don't feel like myself, or what's going on with me, or what's wrong with me. And there's nothing wrong with you. You're responding to a trauma, and you're going to respond differently based on your own background and experiences and beliefs. And there's this term, which I don't love, but I'm going to use because it's very out there, called hysterical bonding. And
Ooh,
again,
what's that?
it's not a clinical term, but it's used in the sense of like, after the discovery or disclosure of infidelity, there's oftentimes the hurt partner will feel this kind of big surge of sexual desire and will have a lot of sex with their partner. And this can last a few days or a few weeks, and then kind of come out of it. And there can be a lot of shame that comes from it, because it's like, wow, I just found out my partner cheated on me and I just had so much sex with them. Like, what was going on? And it can be from this sense of reclaiming, I want this person to be mine. It can be this sense of insecurity, like, I want to show you, like, look how fun or wild, or here I am. Or it can just be this, I need you close. Again, you're my teddy bear. I'm hurting. I need you close to me. It can just be this moment of like, I don't even know. Like, there's all this like emotion and energy, and some people that pulls them into sex. Sometimes it can be like, we're being really vulnerable, and that's sexy. So if you've experienced that, like, knowing that is a very common response, but it's also very common to be like, don't touch me, like, move away from me. This is where it's hard because it's such a spectrum, but I think that's really important for people to know, because I have people on both ends of that coming in and being like, what's wrong? Like, what do I do? And just starting with like, hey, like, everyone is responding a little bit differently here. However it comes up, but it impacts, because again, sex is really vulnerable. And so when this trust has been broken, we're going to respond in different ways.
Hmm. Wow. I'd never heard of that, by the
Yeah.
way. What did you call that? Hysterical bonding?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of
I know
crazy.
the term is like, it feels, it's very, I mean, I have a lot of issues with it, but like, it's one of those, if you hear it comes up a lot in the infidelity betrayal space. And so if people hear it, and I think it helps when people know, like, they're not the only one. Like, it's so common that, someone coined a term for it. So you're not alone if this happens, because that's one of the ones that I see, especially the shame is usually when people come in and like, oh, what does this mean about me? Who am I that I had sex with someone who just betrayed me so badly? Right?
Yeah. So what advice do you give to those couples who want to reconnect sexually after they've been betrayed?
Go slow. You can always add more. We can't take away. When we add something in too quickly, or you experience something, there might require repair. So I always tell, let's go slow. Let's tiptoe in. And really, we want to reteach your nervous system this person is safe. And so that might be just starting with for some people, it's just being in the same room with their partner and just sitting quietly. It might be on opposite ends of the couch. Some people can tolerate kind of being next to each other. I do some mindfulness exercises with them. One that I really love is like having each partner sit next to each other, on the couch, usually not in a bed, because the couch is a little more normal, or not normal, neutral is the word I was looking for there, neutral. Sitting next to each other, close their eyes if that feels accessible to them. And the goal is just to try and match each other's breathing. Because what this does is has them be really present. They're in tune with their partner, but it's not so intimidating where you're having to make, intense eye contact or anything like that. So it can be a way to start to reconnect. And then you can start to increase that where you are having eye contact or you're laying in bed. You can just keep adding to that where you feel safe, if it doesn't even feel accessible to start to have sex, but we're just trying to create a positive connection with being physical and being in the same space.
So, what are some signs you think that sexual healing is occurring?
You feel calmer, like your nervous system feels a little bit calmer with your partner there, and that you're able to talk to them when you aren't feeling calm. One thing I see a lot is, people will be having sex and they'll say one partner, the hurt partner, got triggered and didn't tell their other partner. They just hold on to it. And I generally encourage people, like the hurt partner, to tell their partner when they're feeling activated, even if that means, and it usually does, means that sex stops or it's paused because they're feeling it. Right? If you're triggered and you're in your head or you're having a flashback or thinking of this or whatever, like you are not in that moment. And if you're just holding it, so I don't want to ruin the moment. I want us to, get through this. We should, quote unquote, be doing this. Like, no, what we want to do is working on repair because that's going to create more disconnect. I have to hold this thing on my own. It reminds us I'm alone in this. I have to do this work. I feel broken. Something's wrong with me. See, they can keep having sex versus turning to your partner and saying, I'm having a hard moment, right? Or I need you to hold me. It doesn't always have to be a deep dive. Like when I encourage people to tell their partner when they're feeling activated or triggered, sometimes we do want to do like a deep dive into it, but sometimes it can just be like, you can come up with kind of a code phrase. I'm in my head. I'm struggling. I need some reassurance, like whatever it is. So then your partner knows they can guess kind of what you're thinking in that moment and give you a hug if that's what you want, or give you words of reassurance. And I encourage people to talk about this beforehand, not do it in the moment. So this is usually in my office what we're talking about. Okay, if you get triggered in the moment when you guys are having sex, what can you do to tell your partner, okay, I need to slow down. And what do you want generally in that moment? Of course, you can change your mind. Some people are really physical. They do want some physical touch or a hug. And other people are like, no, just tell me, you love me. I'm so sorry. Or I'm here with you. Or some people just want to be quiet. So then they have this playbook to go off of during sex. But let that be a reconnecting moment. Again, that's turning that that grizzly bear into a teddy bear. I can be with this person. They're with me in it. I'm not holding this alone.
Wow, that's so impactful. I mean, I think that those, would be so the whole, idea of being intimate with somebody again after, they've betrayed you seems so vulnerable and so, it seems very difficult for the person that was betrayed, I think, but I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's where somebody like you comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
To help people navigate those difficult conversations and situations.
Well, it can also open up conversations that people have never had because people don't like to talk about sex or we don't like to talk about infidelity. We want to know if it's happening to someone else's just like that, but we don't want to talk about ourselves. So in sex, then this can really open up people's sex lives. That's where it's like going back to that statement of like, I hate how we got here, but I love where our relationship is. We have to put our cards on the table. We have to talk about this to move forward so people can actually have a more rich and intimate sex life because it's like, well, if we're going to stay in this, I want you to know this is what I'm interested in exploring, or I want to try this. Or I've worked with a lot of couples that have opened up their relationship after infidelity because of discussions that they've had or they've learned things about themselves. And so that's a whole another thing to navigate and talk through. And so it's really, infidelity can create a better sex life. I wouldn't recommend it. It's not the best way to get to a good sex life, but it can happen because we're having these deep conversations and vulnerable sharing.
So, a lot of couples in a relationship where somebody has cheated, I'm sure they have a hard time deciding whether they're going to stay or leave. And so how do couples determine whether, a relationship is reparable or not?
It is very rarely one thing that makes that decision. For some people it is. It is you cheated and I'm out. And that is, perfectly fine. Like everyone has to decide for themselves. And that's something for me, like my goal when a couple comes in isn't to help them stay together necessarily, unless that like if that's what they want, that's what I'm helping them do. But it's really helping them navigate and figure out what is the best decision for them. Is that staying together? Is that ending the relationship? And I don't have skin in the game of which way it goes. It's really about like what is going to work for that couple. So it's how do you figure that out? Of really often in the beginning, it's okay, let's slow this down. Again, you staying right now, you being here doesn't mean that you guys are making the decision to stay forever. Because I really think that's an important thing that gets overlooked. It's not just the hurt partner that has to decide to stay. The partner who was unfaithful also has to decide to stay. Because a lot of times it's like, well, I'm just trying to like make up. I have to do this. But it's like they both need to have a very clear understanding of why they're staying. Going back to that why, like why the infidelity happens is really important. But I really work with both partners on figuring out why are you staying? Like that will help ground them in the moments that are difficult because this is an up and down journey and helps them make sense of, is this still making sense to stay in this relationship or not? Right? And that's something I can come back to. Like, does that still apply here? And so it's those ongoing conversations. Is it consistent action happening over time? But a lot of times what I tell couples is like, I don't know where we're going to end up, but we're going to work one brick at a time. We're laying one brick in this path at a time. So what do you need today? Because so often I see partners come in and they're like, how are we ever going to do this? I'm like, are we ever going to get back? Are we ever going to do this? And they're looking so far in the future. There's so much anxiety that it takes them out of gathering the information they need today to help them make a decision in the future. So it's sometimes, let's not analyze, let's just experience and take in. How am I feeling today? What do I feel about this? And then when you have enough kind of data points, then we can put that together and say, well, what does this mean for you? Like, is this a relationship you can stay in? Can you stay right now? Can you stay another week? Can you stay this? Like, and does that work for you? What does that feel like for you?
So what are some red flags that you've seen that a relationship may not be safe to continue, or maybe they just shouldn't be together?
Yeah. If there's consistent avoidance of talking about it by both parties, we're just bearing this under the rug, like it's fine. Those things just don't go away. You sweep enough stuff under the rug, you're going to get a big enough pile and trip over it. So it's, are we talking about it? And it doesn't mean that it's, okay, this is really easy and comfortable, but are we doing the hard work to try and have these difficult conversations? If the conversations that couples are having are explosive and feel out of control and aren't able to be managed, like that's really, really important to get some professional support there, because those can cause more damage. And it doesn't mean, there's often a lot of times after infidelity, big explosive conversations and discussions. So like having those periodically doesn't mean necessarily it's a red flag, but like I've seen couples where it's just it just feels out of control. Everyone's consistently activated. That's not a safe place. We have to be able to get to a space to go deeper. And if you are in this activated state, we can't get into the deeper stuff in order to move forward. If there's any abuse happening, physical or financial or emotional, definitely need to get professional help there, or any substance abuse or misuse that's impacting. Like those are things that we really want to take care of, because those are things that are going to impact the healing process. Right.
Of course. So what is one thing that every betrayed partner should know?
There's no one right way to heal. People are going to tell you, you have to do this, you have to do that, you must leave, you shouldn't leave, you should do that. But there really is not one way. I have seen this so many ways, in ways that people will be like, there's no way that's healthy. And through the process, that's what worked for this couple, right? I'll share some of my experience, but like I will tell people, like, I want to help you guys figure out what's going to work for you. We do it with intentionality. This comes up a lot, like with questions. Questions are a big part of the healing process. Often the hurt partner has a lot of questions about what's happened. They want details. Again, I'll say, like, I'm never going to tell you you can or cannot ask a question, but we're going to slow down and look through and really be intentional about it and try to ask questions that are going to help you move forward. Because oftentimes, like nitty gritty questions, what was this position? How did this particular body part look? Is for many people is not very helpful. It can just re-traumatize, can keep people stuck. But I've also seen people where the nitty gritty actually releases them, because they're like, I'm going to imagine this, and this. And when I actually know it, then I can let it go. But it's like working with people to understand, is that the type of person like that you are? Is that how you take in information? So it's really like going slow and being intentional with them. So don't let anyone tell you that there's only one way to heal or to do this.
Hmm. And what about, let's take it from the other side. And what's one thing every unfaithful partner should know?
That you deserve empathy too. Your feelings matter. Right? Because I think a lot of times I see people have demonize or dehumanize the person who is unfaithful. They have to be a narcissist. They have no morals. They have this. And when we do that kind of black and white, it doesn't leave space for the healing. Because if you're with someone like in this, or we think of people in these ways, like they're either this or they're that, it's hard to be in relationship with anybody. Like if we were held to our worst mistakes, we wouldn't want to be with anybody. And there are like more painful and more devastating choices that people make. And that is not to minimize that, but it's really to have empathy, but still hold responsibility. Empathy doesn't mean that we're saying it's okay or excusing it, but empathy is where we understand and how growth and forward momentum happens. But there is kind of a balance to this and a bit of a dance. When couples first come in, they're in that immediate aftermath. Like there is more kind of care to the hurt partner. And we have to do that in order to get to the empathy and the understanding and the why. So there is this imbalance at first. It's just like if your partner is bleeding out and you also have a cut, like we're going to take care of that, but we got to take care of your partner who's bleeding out first. Okay, so the partner's bleeding out. Once we get them a little more stable, we can come and hear you. But like the person who was unfaithful deserves to have their feelings heard too, and have that empathy.
Yeah. So if a listener discovered today that, let's say, their partner had been unfaithful, what are the 3 things you would want them to do in like the next 24 hours?
These are going to be hard things to do, but I think really helpful of try to slow down. Like it's like your world has come crashing in, and try to slow down and make sure you are safe. And that's not like necessarily physical safety. It might be for some people, but really of just like, what do I need to do to kind of take care of myself? Is that like leaving for the night, like going to a friend's house? Is it asking my partner to leave? Is it just doing something where I can have my kids taken care of so I can have some space alone to myself? And obviously that's not, all of those options are not available to everybody, but really of like, how do I just slow this down and acknowledging that I just went through this trauma. And I need to, if I'd gone through any type of trauma, what do I need to do to take care of myself, right? And to be mindful of who you tell, right? In those first 24 hours, again, I've heard so many people say, oh, I wish I hadn't told that, but of like, how do I get support in a way that feels really safe? And so that might be like, how do I find a therapist? How do I find somebody who can support me in this like world that has just totally flipped upside down?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been such an eye-opening conversation. It's a topic that I have never covered before. So I thank you so much for coming on. And so for all those people that are listening, that are watching you thinking, wow, she is amazing and I could really use her help. How can people get in touch with you? How can they contact you?
You can find me on my website, laurenconsul.com. I'm also on social media, all at Lauren Consul on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I post a lot of longer form content on YouTube about infidelity, but either social media or my website are the best way to get a hold of me.
That is amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate it. And remember, this is not meant to be any type of definitely religious advice. So if you have experienced infidelity and are really, in a hurt position, I would definitely ask you to seek help and seek the counsel of a therapist because, you need to be able to heal yourself first. So, well, I am done here and it's been real and really intimate. And remember, if you are having any issues at all, to speak with your healthcare provider, speak with a mental health therapist, seek out a sex therapist. And until next time, this is the Muslim Sex Podcast. So thank you for listening to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a review, share and like the podcast. And if you leave me a review, I'd love to shout you out on social media. So be sure that you share it with all your friends. And thanks for listening.